Of all the technological advances of the second millennium, perhaps the most far-reaching began during the mid-14th century. The development of relief printing was not the work of any one person, although it was commonly attributed to a goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg of Mainz, Germany. Between 1450 and 1455, Gutenberg printed 200 copies of the 42-line Bible, of which 35 copies were printed on parchment. The Gutenberg Bible, sometimes also known as the Mazarin Bible, from the Cardinal Mazarin Library in Paris, is generally considered as being the first relief printed book. It was a magnificently printed volume, exhibiting at the very foundation of the art a skill in press work scarcely surpassed by any of Gutenberg's immediate successors. As a format for his 42-line Bible, Gutenberg copied examples of early manuscript pages. The Gothic handwritten text became the model for his metal cast printing types. First, the page was metal cast, hand-composed, and locked into position on a flatbed screw press, the design of which was similar to an olive press. Each page was laid out and completed with the aid of an artist or scribe who applied the large decorative initials, small caps, and illuminations according to the design of the page. These were called rubrications. The manner in which Gutenberg probably cast his metal type is demonstrated here. First, from hand-rendered drawings came the development of a counterpunch, which helped form the punch. These were from hard metals. The completed punch was then impressed into a soft metal matrix, which acted as a casting mold. From there, the matrix was locked into a holding form, and a molten alloy of lead, tin, and antimony poured into the form to create the type slug. The small round nick on the body of the type was there to help with the alignment of type when hand setting on a composing stick. During the early days, each individual character or slug was hand set on a composing stick, backwards and upside down. The type was then cast and placed into a job case for future use. In the 15th century, it was considered the work of the devil to produce printed images not sanctioned by the church, and anyone caught doing so was considered a heretic and in league with the devil. Gutenberg challenged the church on the premise that by printing the 42-line Bible, he was disseminating the Word of God and therefore blameless of any wrongdoing. Since the church could not refute the Word of God and could not find fault with his argument, they dropped all charges, thus paving the way for other printers. By 1473, there was a growing number of letterpress printed in major cities throughout Europe. The earliest books printed were those both in format and letter style after the early German black letter manuaries. Words composed and written by monastic scribes were replaced by movable type cast in a matrix, locked in a chase, and printed. Beyond the early woodcuts of Germany and France, there were other forms of relief printing, which employed the use of white line metal cuts. Generally, these were hand-drawn line illustrations inscribed upon a flat metal plate, similar in process to dry point etching. The difference being that once the plate surface was inked, it was not wiped clean, as is engraving, but relief printed, the effect being a white line illustration on a black background. However, most illustrative material was cut and relief printed from woodcuts, and in many cases enhanced by hand coloring, as in this Italian woodcut depicting an early sea battle between the Venetian fleet and the Turks. Venice in the 15th century had become the outstanding European center of commerce and industry. If the German, Johannes Gutenberg, invented the process of printing with movable types, it was a Frenchman, Nicholas Jensen, who first put the design of typefaces on a high artistic level. But it was Aldus Manutius, the Italian, who first showed the way by which printing could be best disseminated among the greatest number of people by producing books of convenient size and selling them at a reasonable price. This double-page spread, printed by the Aldine Press in 1501, shows the first use of an italic typeface. Other designers like type punch cutter Claude Garamond of Paris were among the first to make an independent profession of the art of typographic design. Seen here is his famous Roman typeface, which was based upon the designs of Aldus Manutius and Francesco Griffo of Italy. 16th century Germany still specialized in the art of woodblock. The Werdank, a page of which is seen here, is probably the finest book ever achieved by the craftsmen of that nation, as it represented a successful blending of decoration and typography within a unified design. Robert Estienne of Paris attained fame by compiling dictionaries of Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. His ability as a scholar was equal to his success as printer-typographer. His books, many of which printed with types designed by Claude Garraman, with borders, initials, and ornaments engraved by Geoffrey Torrey. In 1638, the first letterpress arrived in Massachusetts. In 1640 appeared the first publication of the whole book of Psalms, a page of which is seen here. Note the uneven alignment of characters and what appears to be very heavy imprinting of type into the paper. The following illustrations were taken from a recent magazine article that spoke lavishly about the German Book and Type Museum in Leipzig, Germany. The type specimen books shown here range in date from early 1700s to the beginning of the 20th century, all of which were printed in letterpress. In Europe and in the United States, letterpress continued as the preferred process for most printing. However, toward the end of the 19th century, the traditional method of hand-setting lines of type, character by character, on a composing stick and locking it into a form for printing gave way to a more modern approach of setting type line for line on a machine called linotype, which was a process whereby the type was molten cast into a brass matrix and then set in measured lengths line for line by a linotype keyboard operator. For posters, broadsides, and handbills printed in the late 19th century, typographers used large display faces made of wood, which were then locked into a chase and relief printed the same way. After the type was locked into a chase, repro proofs were pulled on a flatbed press and sent to the art director or designer for corrections and or refinements. The ideal repro was kiss impressed lightly onto the surface of the paper in such a way as to not impair or deeply impress the surface of the paper. In printing the Crane's letterpress book, Dicksons of Atlanta used photo-etched brass letterpress plates and printed each page of the book on an original Heidelberg press. Note, there is a growing number of dedicated young printers in the U.S. today that still print limited edition letterpress books in small quantities the more traditional way.